Last night on the show, 3 weeks into the war, we highlighted what few in the American media seem to be seriously considering. The idea of a Ukrainian victory, the possibility Ukraine buys enough time to win this war outright through resistance on the ground, thereby forcing the Russians to leave as part of a diplomatic solution. And today, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy talked about it during a speech recorded before his address to Congress.
Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
The Russians have been stalled across Ukraine, with the Ukrainian resistance wearing down an enemy that looks increasingly ill-prepared for a fight they started. Here's an advisor to President Zelenskyy and head of the Ukrainian negotiating team speaking to NewsHour yesterday about Ukrainian confidence that a ceasefire could come soon.
We are confident because the Russians have used all of their resources that they were planning to use in this war. They don't have the reserves. They don't have the supply chain. They were planning to move in their troops, capture as much territory as possible in 3 days, and basically have a blitzkrieg. They did not do that, and they will not do that. They are stuck fighting in their current positions, and they have no chances whatsoever to move further into Ukrainian territory. Therefore, we have much confidence that we will have a ceasefire in the coming days.
All right, now some of that is clearly bluster, but take a look at this headline in the Financial Times. A draft of a 15-point peace plan that includes a ceasefire and Russian withdrawal from Ukraine, with Ukraine agreeing to become a neutral state and to not seek NATO membership and not be host to any foreign military bases from countries like the U.S. It would still maintain its own military. In response, that same Ukrainian negotiator, Mikhailo Podolyak, tweeted this quote, briefly, FT published a draft which represents the requesting position of the Russian side, nothing more. The Ukrainian side has its own positions. The only thing we confirm at this stage is a ceasefire, withdrawal of Russian troops, and security guarantees from a number of countries. But President Zelenskyy did signal this week that Ukraine could give up its long-standing aim to join NATO, with a Ukrainian member of parliament describing that concession to NewsNation's Leland Vittert last night as simple reality.
We are in reality right now. And, the main reason why Russia just to invade Ukraine is that Ukrainians, as the European nation, would like to be in Euro-Atlantic institution, in the European Union and the NATO Union as well. So we are ready to say, as the president said, ready to negotiate, to be a neutral country, and just to change or to admit the legislation in our constitution to be a neutral state near the Russia. So that's what we can negotiate with Russia right now.
So this sounds to me, and again, I'm not an expert in this area, like they're kind of close. But joining me now is someone who is an expert in this area. Kurt Volker, who served under 6 presidential administrations. He was appointed U.S. ambassador to NATO by President George W. Bush and later served as U.S. special representative for Ukraine negotiations from 2017 to 19 under President Donald Trump. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. So what do you make of everything we're hearing? It does sound to me like there are some basic agreement on what you would have expected would have been some of the most difficult terms.
Yeah. So it all starts with the situation on the ground. And as you said, the Russian forces are bogged down. Their supply chains are under challenge right now. They're not advancing. They are resorting to more desperate tactics, such as just bombing civilian areas, which just makes them look even worse and more desperate. They're asking China for help. They're talking about bringing in Syrian fighters. They're trying to warn off NATO by saying we may attack your supply chain to Ukraine. So they are acting in a very desperate way. that gives an indicator that if they really feel that way, they might be looking for some kind of settlement. I personally don't think they're quite ready for that yet. They still want to extract concessions from Ukraine. Putin, after all of this today, Lavrov, the foreign minister, after all of this today, said that they still want the demilitarization of Ukraine. So it's not clear where they're headed. But you're right, there's something in the air. And Zelenskyy is clearly trying to tease this out a little bit by saying that he simply recognizes the reality that Ukraine was not making progress toward joining NATO anyway, blaming Western Europe mainly for that they were not bringing Ukraine in. I said, well, let's just recognize that reality. And if that gives a fig leaf to Putin so that he can agree to a peace settlement where he withdraws his forces, then there might be some basis there. But again, I don't think they're quite ready for that yet. I think Russia is going to tease this out, escalate its demands, still try to escalate its fighting as well. But if this goes on for another week or two, I think the tide turns really more and more against Russia.
Let me read you something that Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov said today to Russian TV about peace talks. He said the following: "The negotiations are not easy for obvious reasons. But nevertheless, there is some hope of reaching a compromise. Neutral status is now being seriously discussed, seriously along, of course, with security guarantees. This is what is now being discussed at the talks. There are absolutely specific wordings, and in my view, the sides are close to agreeing on them." I was just stunned to hear him say that. Is there something more to that you would understand that I wouldn't, that he's saying?
Well, the only thing I would caution you is that the night before Russia invaded, he was saying Russia was not going to invade.
Okay, fair enough.
So I would take what he's saying with a grain of salt, and Putin is the decision maker here.
Yeah. But so you think that we should basically ignore anything coming from the Russian side, that they're just trying to make it seem like they're open to peace talks, but everything from their perspective is going to be, how are things going on the ground?
Yeah, that's what I would say, is watch what happens on the ground, and let's make sure the situation on the ground is turning against Russia. Because as they see that, and they see that their options are limited, squeezed between a military failure on the one hand and economic failure due to the sanctions on the other, that's when there will be a willingness to try to find a way out. As I said, I don't think they're quite there yet. But that's where we have to get them to. So we keep up the pressure militarily by supporting the Ukrainians, as we're doing today with the announcement that President Biden made of another $800 million and these drone aircraft that will go after some of the Russian supply lines and tanks. Keep doing that, and then maybe the Russians will be serious about negotiating.
What does a neutral Ukraine mean? I mean, what exactly changes if Ukraine is quote unquote neutral?
Yeah, this is a great question. There are historical examples here that people will have in mind. They'll think of Finland at the end of World War II, or Sweden at the end of World War II, or Austria, all of which were different models of non-alignment or neutrality in one way or another, all of which are kind of irrelevant and dated now. They're all members of the European Union. They're all democracies. None of them are aligned with Russia in any way. They have their own defense forces, and they don't face any real external threats. Ukraine is in a very different situation. It faces an immediate external threat from this Russian attack. It has also proven that it has the military means to defend itself, as bloody and awful as it is. They are defending themselves without being a member of NATO. So this may look rather different, where you have a powerful Ukraine that has fought off an attacker and then doesn't look to other allies or to NATO for a NATO membership for protection, but rather forms its own arrangements with other countries on a bilateral basis, or its own security arrangements on a national and bilateral basis to be secure. The one thing that the Russians have insisted on is still not going to happen, and that is the demilitarization of Ukraine. Right. The Ukrainians know the only thing that has saved them is their ability to fight.
Yeah. Former U.S. Ambassador Kurt Volker, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.